You're standing in a grocery store at 9 p.m., and something in your body wants out. Not because you're tired, not because anything happened. You leave faster than you planned, and the moment you hit the parking lot, it lifts. That was a 1950s efficiency experiment running on your nervous system without your consent. The ceiling above that grocery store was designed by engineers doing economic calculations on glass tubes. Wattage per square foot, maintenance intervals, cost per lumen. That same ceiling is in the airport gate, the school hallway, the office floor, the hospital waiting room. Made once, copied everywhere. The question is who decided that, and why every building in the world went along. A gas lamp on the wall, an incandescent bulb over a table, a candle in the corner. Each cast a pool of warm light and let everything outside it go dark. Rooms had layers, brightness where you needed it, shadow everywhere else. The corner of a room existed, you could retreat into it. Then fluorescent tubes arrived and killed the corner entirely. A fluorescent tube didn't offer a pool of light, it offered a blanket of it. Flat, even, shadowless coverage from wall to wall. One kind of light was designed for the person in the room. The other was designed for the person cleaning it. General Electric and Sylvania commercialized fluorescent lighting in the late 1930s.
Oh, wow.
What a smart person. You bought Sylvania's soft white light bulbs, where my light lasts longer. 5% longer than in other soft white bulbs.
Fluorescent tubes were roughly 3 times more efficient than incandescent, lasted longer, and cost far less to run across a large space. For anyone operating a building, not living in one, but operating one, it was a different category of product entirely. The standards followed the technology, not the other way around. The Illuminating Engineering Society's first classroom guidelines in 1918 recommended 3-foot candles minimum, a modest level that assumed daylight would do most of the work. By the late 1940s, that number had jumped to 30. By 1959, a Building Research Institute study pushed the recommendation to 70. That's a 23-fold increase in 40 years. Human eyes hadn't changed. What changed was that fluorescent technology made those levels affordable, and lamp manufacturers had every reason to push standards upward. More light sold more product. Schools absorbed this logic first. Crow Island School in Winnetka, Illinois opened in 1940. Child-scaled windows on 3 sides of every classroom. Daylight as the primary source. Shadow and brightness layered the way they are outside. It was the last serious attempt to build a school around the human eye before economics took over. Then the post-war baby boom hit and Crow Island lost. New buildings had to go up fast. Fluorescent grids were the cheapest answer, and nobody stopped to ask what was being traded away. Windows shrank because fluorescent coverage made natural light unnecessary. By 1960, fluorescent lighting was the norm in virtually every new American classroom. The delivery system that made this permanent was the drop ceiling. A standardized T-bar grid held fluorescent tubes, HVAC ducts, and electrical wiring in a single suspended layer. One infrastructure decision covered everything. Cheap to install, modular, easy to maintain. What it couldn't do was create the layered quality that made a space feel human. Uniformity was the point. Shadow was the cost nobody wrote down. That infrastructure didn't stay in schools. It moved through the post-war construction boom, building by building, carried by the same arguments. Cheaper to install, easier to maintain, defensible against complaints. Offices adopted the fluorescent grid because open-plan floors needed uniform coverage. You can't run individual task lighting across a floor plate holding 200 desks that rearranges every few years. The light was designed for the building, not the person in it. Hospitals and airports followed, and here the reasoning shifts. This wasn't an architect's choice. It was a lawyer's. There's a rule called Standard 90.1 that controls energy use in almost every big commercial building in the country, and it does something very specific. It gives building owners a legal shield. Someone trips in a hospital corridor and sues. The owner pulls out the compliance paperwork. The lighting met the IES recommended foot candle level at the code-approved wattage. Case closed. Then in 2012, a new federal rule forced buildings to use 30% less energy. And the cheapest way to follow that rule was cheap LEDs. Same overhead grid, same uniform coverage, now with an energy certificate attached. The architecture didn't change. The legal logic just got a new layer of paperwork on top of it. Comfort doesn't have a line item, auditability does. So any architect who wants to deviate, to lower the overhead brightness, to introduce shadow, to use warmer sources, has to fight the code, the contractor, the facilities manager, and the insurance auditor simultaneously. And they have to do it with no legal backstop if something goes wrong. Most don't bother. That logic spread to government buildings, courthouses, transit stations. Anywhere the person deciding what goes in the ceiling was never the person spending 8 hours underneath it. Grocery stores push the logic further. Bright, shadowless light makes products readable from a distance, flattens shadows that might make items look old, and requires no redesign when the store layout changes, which it does constantly. Illuminance and big box retail often runs higher than offices, not because anyone studied what customers preferred, but because there was no cost to going brighter. Fast food chains took this even further, and this part is deliberate. You finish your last fry and something says, "Get up." Not because you're uncomfortable, just a vague restlessness that makes staying feel slightly wrong. You assume you're done. You're not done. The room is evicting you. McDonald's spent decades engineering exactly this response. Color temperatures above 5,000 Kelvin suppress melatonin and spike alertness. That's the restlessness. The hard plastic seating becomes physically uncomfortable after about 20 minutes. That's the escalation. The room runs both systems at once, neither one announcing itself. You feel the result and call it being done. The table turns over. Then LEDs arrived. We thought this was finally the fix. It actually made the lie easier to tell. LEDs could dim smoothly, shift color temperature across the day, mimic the spectral distribution of daylight. The technology was genuinely different. LinkedIn's offices installed tunable LED systems in private focus rooms. Workers adjust color temperature and intensity via remote chromotherapy principles baked in, costing 20 to 30% more to install. The individual control is real. The architecture underneath it is identical to the one built in 1955. Suspended ceiling grid, uniform overhead sources, facilities manage defaults most workers never touch. The metric driving the broader LED rollout was never human experience. It was wattage. The IES standards that fluorescent technology inflated in the 1950s were treated as fixed. Efficient delivery of the existing standard was the goal. Cheap LEDs introduced a new wrinkle. You know how a steak looks perfect in the grocery store display, then you get it home and it looks gray and slightly wrong? That's not the meat. That's a technical lie told in light. The Color Rendering Index, CRI, is scored out of 100. A bulb-rated CRY 90 sounds like it passed. What it actually means is that it passed a test using 8 basic colors, the easy ones. Deep reds and skin tones aren't in that group, and cheap LEDs are engineered to ace the easy test while getting those completely wrong. Skin looks flat, food looks wrong. Nothing looks quite dead enough to complain about. Think about the last time you hit that 3 p.m. wall. Reading the same sentence 3 times, blaming the coffee, or your own brain going soft. Studies comparing standard LEDs against daylight mimicking LEDs at identical illuminance levels find concrete differences. When the spectrum shifts to mimic daylight, working memory errors drop to an average of 5.2 against 6.7 under standard LEDs, and reaction times sharpen to 812 milliseconds, a gap that shows up on the same desk with the same task in the same person. Change the light overhead, change how you think. Your brain wasn't failing the task. The room was failing your brain. The broader consequence is what the nervous system does with repetition. It uses environmental variation, shifts in light intensity, color temperature, and direction to regulate time, energy, and mood. When every stop on the institutional loop runs the same overhead grid at the same intensity and color temperature, that variation collapses. Every space feels like every other space, and what's left is a low-grade sense that something is wrong with no explanation attached. The built environment wasn't designed to make you feel bad. It was designed to be cheap, easy to maintain, and simple to scale. Those 3 goals, prioritized over your biology, produce the world we move through every day. Lighting is just where your body registers the violation first. Once you see the ceiling grid for what it actually is, a 1950s economic calculation, you'll notice it everywhere. Subscribe to help us decode the systems hiding in plain sight.